Welcome, everyone, to the C-Suite Sales and Marketing Perspectives podcast. I'm Steve McDonald, your host. Today, we've got a super interesting guest. We have Jeremiah Glodoveza on. And Jeremiah, you are not only the SVP Global Head of Marketing Communications at NIUM, you've done a ton of work on the agency side, on the client side. You've done a ton of work with Microsoft. In fact, you've probably, I think you would self-profess, you've been there for some of the learnings with some of the biggest failures at Microsoft and some of the greatest successes. Uh, and what we're going to talk about today throughout all of that is why is CMOs in the B2B world, why does the marketing need to be more like entertainment? But before we get started there, I'd love to have you kind of explain a little bit more about your background.
Yeah, exciting, Steve. Thanks for having me on. I've been privileged to be on sort of the receiving end of some of tech's biggest successes, but like you pointed out, on the unfortunate side of some of the biggest losses, I think things like HD DVD and the last format battle against Blu-ray was one I was on the losing end of. But I always believe that you learn as much from your losses as you do from your wins. So, like you pointed out, career marketer. Having grown up on the agency side with, advertising and PR firms in the early stages of my career, bounced around both on the enterprise side with Microsoft and then very most recently been specializing in the financial technology space, which I'm really excited about some of the developments in this area, particularly with brands like Zelle, which I helped pioneer.
We definitely know
along
the
with,
success
some
of
of the
Zelle.
best marketers I've ever worked with in my career.
So let's kind of dive right in. You've got a point of view, right, on the importance of entertainment and B2B marketing. Tell us
Sure.
your thoughts on the subject.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting topic that you and I have had some conversations around about how B2B is changing today in terms of having to cut through a ton of noise in the space, right? Not only are brands competing with other companies for attention, but they're also competing with other mediums that their target customers are consuming on a regular basis in the form of entertainment, right? The streaming era just basically has everybody on, and you couple streaming together with social media, and you've just got an environment where there's so much messaging and so much activity vying for your attention that coming up with strategies as a marketer where you can just cut through that noise requires that you actually take cues from folks that are actually doing this pretty well. And I would say that in B2B, like the reference point is becoming the entertainment space, because in the entertainment space, having grown up in the film industry and with experiential marketing, they just do an exceptional job on a number of things with relation to marketing, from the storytelling to the experiences that they create, from the anticipation that they build for products, all the way through to how they heroize characters in their productions. I think everything that we could do well in marketing can take cues from how the entertainment industry.
And it's interesting because there's a lot of factors that point towards this. So there's been a lot of studies about how the expectations, like, what we want in a B2C world, like just as consumers, right? And be entertained and the kind of experiences that we expect. Those same like customer experiences, like Amazon has kind of ruined it for the B2B world, right? Because our buyers, they now expect things to happen as if because they don't put on a different shirt or shoes or outfit and say, now I'm at the office, now I'm a B2B buyer, right? This morning I was a consumer when I stopped by and got my Starbucks, right? And I expected a quick, path through the line as I'm off to the office. And so we expect a lot from the B2C world and that overall experience into the B2B world. And there's been many studies that have actually, said that. It's not just, Jeremiah and Steve's opinion on this. So the idea that we make decisions, with this blurred world of B2B and B2C shouldn't be new to us at all.
Well, Completely. Like it's this consumerization that you're pointing out to, the consumerization of B2B marketing, I think is that macro trend that you're picking up on, right? Where from a consumption perspective, we've been conditioned now to really believe in sort of instant gratification and short forms of content that are immediately informative. I think that the B2B world has been a little bit different and slower in its adoption of sort of these kind of consumer mindset approaches, right? Like we've leveraged kind of tried and true forms, thinking that the attention span of the B2B buyer
Right.
is the same as that is longer than that of the typical consumer. And I think that we're starting to find right now that just this overall consumerization of B2B marketing is such that the target audience is just as busy, just as time constrained as any consumer. So you've got to change your approach to really cut through
And you know,
and
that
gain
attention,
attention
we tend to think of like the
in this world
B2B
today.
buyer, like we're thinking about it from our side as the seller all the time. That's our job to think about that, right? The
Yeah,
buying process for them is a very small part of their
correct.
job.
Dang.
They're not
That's right.
professional buyers, right? They don't do that for a living.
Yes.
Yet they're also trying to do more and
Right.
more of it on their own, like this self-service buyer
Right.
journey, right? So they're consuming more content to make their decisions. You know, they want sound bites,
Correct.
right? You know, we're growing up in this world of Facebook and TikTok
Right.
and all of this where like, attention spans are like
Right.
this. And they have literally been saying, I want shorter form video
Right.
interactive content, right? That so
Mm.
right away, we should be taking our cues to your point, and like
That's right.
they're not long form content necessarily consumers, right? It's not like a good ebook isn't something we want to curl up with in front of the fireplace, right? But we should be thinking about how do we get their attention? How do we add
Right.
value, but in a very short way? And entertainment can be a big way to do that. And so you said something a couple of minutes ago that I want you to expand on a little bit. But you
Correct.
talked about storytelling. And
Yeah.
as marketers, we all know we're supposed to be good storytellers, right?
Yeah.
We know we're supposed to be good storytellers. Whether we spend a lot of time thinking about that really
Yeah.
is another thing. So I'd love to
Yeah.
hear about kind of what your thoughts are on,
Yeah.
storytelling in this kind of B2B environment that we're talking about.
Right. Like, and I'll talk about storytelling in the sense of how entertainment uses it and how it can be applied in B2B marketing. If you think about some of the favorite movies that you've had through the years, right? And I'll use a simple one because everyone can relate to it. Like the Star Wars narrative is the hero's tale that spans generations, right? There's good versus evil. There's triumph over evil, going into a learning process, understanding, being mentored by a wise old man. Those tales go back all the way to medieval times, right? And have roots in allegories that were used to pass history on to different generations. I think when we think about entertainment marketing and what they do well, it's this notion of character development and then also conflict and heroes and villains, right? And I think in B2B marketing, there's an opportunity here for how you position your buyer as the hero. The problem that they're trying to solve is that antagonist or challenge, and then that benefit as sort of that positive resolution, right? But when you tell these stories, there's often the best stories have conflict and resolution and are told in interesting ways. And I think when we start to look at B2B storytelling, what's really important is just how do you focus on a real world problem and how and how it can be transformed with your solution? And then how do you tell those stories in unique and compelling ways, right? Case studies, customer success stories, obviously tried and true methods. But I think in today's modern age, there's even additional forms of content like behind the scenes content that can create deeper emotional connections. That I think is where content and
I don't
marketing is going to
disagree
have in the future.
whatsoever. There's the very famous saying, by Marshall McLuhan, the medium is the message, right? So the medium and the entertainment value around it, the delivery of
Sure.
that message The
Correct.
fact that, that we're going to come in with a bunch of bullet points about our product feature
Yeah.
benefits, right? And wow. We're not even going to get into the conversation without this hero's journey is understanding, them
Right.
and
Right.
the total industry that they're playing in. In the B2B world, we tend to want to only talk about us, right?
Mhm.
We're only selling us. So we want to just talk about us. But the story really is
Yeah.
beyond what we do for
Yeah.
them. It's how it impacts their entire ecosystem, right? And if we're supposed to be colleagues, we're supposed to be trusted advisors, we're supposed to be these
Correct.
colleagues of theirs, really, that are helping them in their journey, right? Facts and figures, that's going to bore the
Right.
crap out of them at the beginning, right? There's going to be a time where
Right.
that's really, really important. But so I love the
Right.
idea of like making them the hero, right? And that hero's
That's
journey.
right. Right. You're right, Steve. And I think that technology today also allows storytelling to be even more immersive, right? Where you can go a step further and actually not just try to make an emotional connection with the consumer, with your
Yes.
target audience, but involve them in the actual story itself, right? And that's where I see live storytelling becoming more a part of the marketing mix. And what I mean by that is how do you create experiential content, events, and the entertainment industry does this in a really great way, right? Where the entertainment industry allows you go to concerts, you feel like you're within that experience. That the audience is the producer is talking to you, the characters are engaging with you. I think that you can do that within the B2B environment in new and
Absolutely. I
creative
mean,
ways,
do
given
you have any
technologies
like
that are
as
available
we're
today.
weaving this story together here, right? Well, are there any great stories that you can tell us that
Yeah.
bring some of this to light that you've done, whether it's with Zell or with NIUM or wherever, right?
Yeah, and I've actually it's not something that I was directly involved with itself. It actually just happened after the fact. But for example, Zell is producing a true crime podcast. If you're a consumer of
After this
podcasts,
happened,
the
right?
most popular ones are sort of true crime related. But they took a unique after this one, of course, the unique approach that they took was to take the challenge of educating the American public in terms of financial scams and that were happening around them. And so what they did was they looked at the financial crimes, which on the surface, aren't the most interesting of topics. Like white collar crimes typically aren't as evocative from an imagery perspective. But they took a really interesting look with this podcast called Nickel and Crime, Nickel and Dime, or something like that. But they really took an interesting look at financial crimes and its impact on people and produced what is a pretty highly acclaimed podcast, right? I think it's that type of storytelling where you take, you know, consumer like approaches, like this true crime approach, and then you apply it to a B2B story, which is around financial crime, and you have a message and you do that storytelling in creative ways that I think is an example of some
Great
exciting
idea.
work that
Take
I've
a,
seen
a subject that doesn't feel very
recently.
sexy and put a crime and scene investigation around it, and bring it to life. What a cool
Yeah.
idea. So
Yeah.
So there's other, trends and things
Yeah,
that are
definitely.
impacting us as marketers. And AI is a huge one of that. So in this world of storytelling and more entertainment, and now AI is on the scene, how
Right.
does that impact? How does that change the game here?
Yeah, I mean, and I'm a big proponent of AI. I think it's certainly transforming how marketers produce not only content, but just materials in general. But current generations of AI are only going to get you so far. I kind of see it as a starting point. I think that the emotion and the tension that a human can bring into a narrative is still something that we need to play an intervening role in. So I kind of see it more as augmented intelligence versus artificial intelligence, right? Like it still requires human augmentation to add some of those pieces that only truly humans who have lived experiences can really deliver on, right? At least that's what I'm clinging to as a marketer that hopes to be gainfully employed for the next couple of years. But I do think that AI is here to stay. It has potential for how we do our craft. I still believe that there's an opportunity for human
So,
augmentation
on that
and
emotional field, that
to
component,
add that emotional feel.
there's definitely in the world of B2B, there's a pretty heavy dose of rational, right, that we have to have in there. But we have to recognize
Yes.
that, I mean, at the core, when we're talking about an
Yeah.
ABM model, it's
Yeah.
because we're selling something so substantial that we're willing to work month after month after month on it.
Yeah.
On the other side, they're putting their name on it, right? They're putting, a lot of time their reputation and their job. I don't know about their career. I don't want to be too dynamic or over dramatic about it, but there's a lot riding on these decisions, right? And so
Right.
there's a huge emotional
Right.
component to this.
Right.
How do you
Right.
see playing that balance between the
Right.
rational and the emotional?
Right. And I think that great stories appeal to both sides of the brain, right? Like, and I think that particularly as you start to heroize not only the buyer, but like what actually makes them the hero in the corporate environment are the statistics and the factual backing for a decision that they're recommending. So it's super important from the perspective of any B2B brand to ensure that they've got the evidence for the benefits that the solutions are bringing. And most of that evidence is delivered from the quant side of the house, right? So the quantitative benefits from whether it's an ROI perspective, whether it's a cost savings benefit, whatever side of the balance sheet equation that you're trying to impact, you cannot function in B2B marketing without some of that customer evidence and that quantitative backing. I do think that, but you can also deliver those statistics and those numbers in creative ways, right? Like, I think that early on, we turn to things like infographics, right? That's such a simple thing these days that we take for granted. But now you're starting to look at different ways to maybe even use AI to visualize some of the quantitative benefit that your technology might be able to bring, right? So that's where I think that the future is heading in terms of how can we then create unique pieces of content that heroize the buying audience, but also then maybe introduce
So I
creative
got to tell you
ways
that what you just said just reminded
display
me of something. It's one of
quantitative
my
data.
favorite new AI tools. It's called napkin.ai. It's like you're writing on a napkin, right? So, and what it does is this: you can put a paragraph of
All right.
text, it's text to graphics, right? So like business infographics, charts and graphs and circles with bullets coming out. And the way I looked at it was like, well, okay, if a picture's worth 1,000 words, then a business graphics might be worth 500, right? And but what it does is it allows power to come through
Right.
from just scanning, right? Just looking at a visual. And I've just watched our clients and their reactions. And as we put them into things like case studies and things like that, when we talk about more entertainment, it doesn't have to be all like Hollywood style entertainment, but just ways of evoking more emotion, giving it so that there's a quick reaction, a quick take. And I've seen, you look at somebody's face and if you've actually created a kind of an aha moment, right? And so I think that's like part of what I'm taking away from all of this is we need to think more about, like, it's not all about PowerPoint presentations and bullet point lists and one sheeters, right? That we actually have to appeal to them as people, not only from just where they're coming from, not a lot of time consuming more content, want it shorter form, want it more interactive, but it could also be down to, like, there's a great company. I'm going to call it a couple of company names. I didn't plan on doing this, but another one is called Relatyo, like RELATYO.com. It's an interactive content company. So it just takes like flat files, PDFs, PowerPoints, right? And allows you to put all kinds of really incredible interactive experiences into it. Videos, pop-ups, scroll overs that look gorgeous. It gives it a level of polish and professionalism that separates it out. So just, standing out in that crowd. And so anyway, let me stop talking.
Right. Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I think the evolution of this more personalized marketing, which is really where both entertainment marketing and B2B marketing are going, right? I'm somewhat old school, right, Steve? Personalization back in the day used to be, hey, you'd put my logo in a pitch deck, and then that meant you related to me. And then maybe I filled in an ROI calculator on your website, and you spit out a number that felt custom in terms of the benefit that you would be providing, right? Like, the tools available today are far more sophisticated in terms of the personalization that they can bring, right? So the use of AI not only to analyze traffic behavior on my website and then present to me customized trends on for how my technology is being sold to me is benefiting, right? Like, or whether it be, hey, I could use AI potentially then to insert Steve into a custom video where he's interacting where in this video with benefits being kind of related to him, right? Like personalized content, right? I think that is sort of the future, right? The applications of AI that are yet to be benefited, but it all really adds up to the future being more personalization in terms of the marketing approaches.
Part of what you're also saying
that
here
we're
is
learning
just
from the
that
entertainment side of
personalization, but
things.
making that other person on the other side feel special, right? Like, just, how, like, whether it's with your wife or your kids, if you actually just say, I get it.
Yeah.
I understand. You had a really hard
Yeah.
day because X, Y, Z, right? You've been dealing with this the last
Yeah.
week, and like to be felt and heard and understood and understand. We all have,
Right.
difficulties in our jobs and our careers and what we're trying to
Correct.
accomplish. And it just helps to like
Right.
have somebody that says, I
Yeah.
get it. Right. But you've got to prove that you get it. And part of that is earning that trust.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is just being
Yeah.
empathetic. And so this whole idea of like
That's right.
entertainment and appealing to the rational and the emotional side, it's not all about glitz and glamour, right? It's about treating them as people. And when you say personalizing, humanizing this, right?
And I learned some of these lessons relatively early in my career. Like I had the privilege of working with a woman named Andy Cunningham, who to this day is one of my, I see as one of the most formative mentors in my career. She learned the art of marketing from probably the greatest marketer of our time in Steve Jobs, where she and I had coined the term business to people marketing, right? Where the approach was to think about the buyer not as this sort of amorphous single entity, but as a person with a lived experience who was drawing on that lived experience to make decisions on a purchase, right? So how do you market to a person should be different from how you market to a business, right? So you've got to engage that person in their everyday life. You've got to frame them as the hero. You've got to provide clear solution and benefits. You've got to drive integrated multi-channel approaches to reaching them. But all of that was built on the fact that you had to first foundationally have a great story, right? And to drive that emotional and rational connection. And that's an approach that I apply to this day, whether it's delivering a multi-channel campaign, whether it's delivering an amazing event for NIUM around the world, right? I really focus on the person at the receiving end and how they feel when they engage with one of our touch points, whether it's at the website to an event to
I have to ask you one last
social
question.
media,
Okay.
ad.
Because we've talked about a lot here, right? If you could
Yeah,
say,
please.
what's the one single most important takeaway that you want people to have from having listened or watched this podcast episode? What would that be?
I would say that the most important thing is to understand in B2B marketing, you are marketing to a person, right? A human being who has a variety of pressures and concerns and a life outside of their day job, which is certainly not considering whether or not they should buy your product. And when you can insert yourself and empathize, I think you hit on a keyword, empathy, right? And when you can empathize with that person and then deliver marketing as if you were in their shoes, I think you'll hit on success. Meaning that if you empathize with the fact that, hey, your buyer is a busy father of two who barely gets time to play golf on the weekend and has a number of competing demands, and you hit that person with, hey, some stories on their Instagram feed about with key statistics on how they can save time, money, effort, etc., and you deliver that in a way that stands out and makes them take notice, you've done good marketing, right? I do think that's the thing. B2B is actually business to person, and to really get
Ooh, you
down
just coined a
to
new
the
term.
human
It's
level in terms of
B2BP,
the approaches that you
business to business person. Yes. Hey,
yeah, I love it.
people
Trademark it. Let's
additional
go.
questions. So would it be appropriate that we actually handed out, gave them a link to your LinkedIn profile that they could reach you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I'm active on LinkedIn. I believe in the power of community. I wouldn't be where I am without sort of the network that I've built up. If there's any way that I can help in others,
Well, fantastic. Jeremiah, thank you so
benefit
much for
from
coming
anything
on
I've learned,
and
I'm
sharing
happy to
all
share.
these insights and making you just think different in a very good, positive way. So I appreciate your participation here today.
Thanks a lot, Steve. Really enjoyed it.